That bag of Epsom salt sitting in your bathroom cabinet, the one you bought for sore feet last winter, is worth more in your garden this weekend than the entire fertilizer aisle at the big box store. I mean that literally. There's a reason your grandfather's tomatoes were the size of softballs while yours look like marbles, and it has nothing to do with the soil being better back then. It's because he knew something the lawn and garden industry has spent 70 years quietly burying under brightly colored bottles and $20 bags of synthetic feed. The folks selling you those bottles have no incentive to tell you that a $4 carton of Epsom salt does the job of 3 of their products combined. None. Their shareholders would have a fit. Stay with me, because around the middle of this I'm going to show you exactly how to rescue a yellowing, sickly tomato plant in about 48 hours for less than the price of a cup of coffee at the gas station. I've watched it work on plants. I was ready to rip out and throw in the burn pile. Before we get into it, do me a favor and drop your growing zone in the comments, or just the state you're gardening in. I read them, and a few of these tricks need a small tweak depending on whether you're in Georgia clay or Minnesota loam. I remember standing in my grandfather's backyard in western Pennsylvania, summer of 1974, watching him scoop white crystals out of a coffee can and sprinkle them around his pepper plants. I asked him what it was. He said, "Boy, that's the cheapest miracle a man can buy. I forgot about it for 40 years, spent thousands on fertilizers that didn't work half as well, and I'm still kicking myself." Let's start with the one that made me a believer. Your tomato leaves curling up, turning yellow between the veins while the veins themselves stay green. Every gardener sees it. Every garden center will sell you a $40 bottle of Tomato Rescue. What you're actually looking at is magnesium deficiency, plain and simple. Magnesium sits at the center of every chlorophyll molecule in that leaf. No magnesium, no green, no photosynthesis, no tomatoes. It's the engine the whole plant runs on. Epsom salt is magnesium sulfate. Not a fertilizer in the way nitrogen is, but a key that unlocks what's already in your soil. 1 tablespoon dissolved in a gallon of water, poured around the base, and you'll see those leaves green back up in 3 to 5 days. Old-timers in the Ohio Valley were doing this in the 1930s. They called it the green up. Pennsylvania State University Extension has confirmed it works specifically when soil tests show magnesium below 30 parts per million, which, by the way, is most American garden soil east of the Mississippi, after a few seasons of growing heavy feeders. But here's where it gets interesting. Magnesium isn't just for tomatoes, and the deficiency isn't just about color. Your peppers, the ones that flower beautifully and then drop those flowers right on the ground before a single fruit sets. You blame the heat, you blame the bees, you blame yourself. It's almost never any of those. Pepper blossoms drop when the plant can't move calcium and phosphorus up the stem fast enough, and magnesium is the freight train that hauls them. Without it, the flowers starve and the plant cuts them loose to save itself. A foliar spray, which just means spraying the leaves directly, of 1 tablespoon Epsom salt in a quart of warm water, mist it on the leaves at sundown twice a week during bloom, and you'll see pepper set jump dramatically. A 2006 trial out of National Gardening Association measured a 35% increase in fruit set on bell peppers treated this way versus untreated controls in the same bed. 35%. That's the difference between a sad little harvest and bushels of peppers you're giving away to neighbors. Now think about how much you've spent on bloom boosters over the years. Think about the shelves of them. Every one of them is essentially selling you what's in that white carton for 1/10 of the price. Roses are next, and roses are where the industry really has its hooks in you. Rose food, rose tonic, rose spike, rose bloom enhancer. Walk that aisle, and you'll see 20 different products, each promising bigger blooms and deeper color. My mother grew the most extraordinary roses on a county road in Lancaster County, and the only thing she ever fed them was a half cup of Epsom salt scratched into the soil around each bush in early spring, right when the first leaf buds broke. That's it. The reason it works on roses is the same reason it works on tomatoes, just amplified. Roses are magnesium hogs. Each new cane, each new leaf, each new bud pulls magnesium from the soil at a tremendous rate. Run out, and you get those pale, washed-out blooms and weak canes that flop over. A half cup in spring, another quarter cup in midsummer, watered in well, and your bushes will throw out new basil canes from the ground up. That's the holy grail. Those new canes are what give you blooms 3 and 4 years from now. Cornell University's Rose Trial Gardens have used this exact protocol for decades. They don't advertise it because they're not selling you anything. Therefore, if it works on roses and peppers and tomatoes, you might be wondering what else in your yard is starving for magnesium without you knowing. The answer is going to surprise you. Your lawn. Yes, your lawn. That patchy yellowing spot near the driveway that you've reseeded 3 times. The bare circles under the maple tree. The way the grass looks tired by August, even though you've fertilized twice. Grass needs magnesium, just like everything else, but lawn fertilizer companies leave it out of most blends because it's cheap, and they'd rather sell you a lawn rescue product in July to fix the problem their spring fertilizer caused. 3 tablespoons of Epsom salt per gallon of water, applied with a watering can or hose end sprayer over 100 square feet, once in late spring and once in midsummer. Grass greens up within a week. Oregon State University Extension documented this in a 2011 turf study and found that lawns receiving supplemental magnesium showed 19% better drought recovery than lawns receiving standard NPK fertilizer alone. 19%. In a dry August, that's the difference between a green lawn and a brown one. But the lawn trick has a catch most people miss, and skipping this step is why some folks try it once and say it didn't work. You have to water it in deeply within an hour. Magnesium sulfate sitting on dry grass blades in full sun can scorch the tips. Apply it in the evening or right before a rain, and you're golden. Apply it at noon in July and walk away, and you'll have crispy edges by morning. That's not the Epsom salt's fault. That's user error, and it's the kind of thing the old-timers knew because they did it 1,000 times, and the modern instructions on a box don't bother to tell you. Now I know what some of you are thinking. My garden's been in for 15 years. My lawn's established. My roses are already huge. Is this just for folks starting over? Not even close. In fact, established gardens are exactly where Epsom salt earns its keep, because the longer a bed has been in production, the more depleted of secondary minerals it becomes. Nitrogen and phosphorus get replenished every time you throw down fertilizer. Magnesium almost never does. Here's what you can do this weekend, with nothing but what's in your cabinet. Walk your established beds with a kitchen tablespoon and the carton. Around every mature tomato, pepper, or rose, scratch 1 tablespoon into the top inch of soil at the drip line, which is the circle directly under the outermost leaves. Water it in. That's it. No tilling, no disturbing roots, no replanting. By the following weekend, you'll see a color change in the foliage you didn't think was possible from a plant you thought was just old. For your established lawn, the hose end sprayer trick works without any prep. You don't need to aerate. You don't need to dethatch first. Just apply it in the evening. Let the dew or your sprinkler carry it down to the roots overnight. For mature shrubs, hydrangeas especially, a half cup scratched in around the base in spring will deepen the blue of blue varieties and intensify the pink of pink ones. The magnesium helps the plant access the aluminum or lack of aluminum that determines color. Old gardeners in coastal Maine have been doing this since at least the 1940s. There are USDA bulletins from that era that reference the practice in passing, almost as an afterthought, because everyone already knew. The point is, established gardens aren't a barrier. They're the reason this works so well. You've already done the hard part. You just need to put the magnesium back. So far, we've covered tomatoes, peppers, roses, lawns, hydrangeas, 5 tricks, and they all rely on the same magnesium science. But the next one is different. It uses Epsom salt for something that has nothing to do with feeding the plant, and this is where most people have never heard the trick at all. Seed germination. You start seeds in spring. Some of them never come up. You blame old seeds. You blame the soil. You blame the weather. Here's what's actually happening on a lot of those seeds. The seed coat is too hard, and the embryo inside can't break through before it exhausts its energy reserve. Soaking seeds in a weak Epsom salt solution, 2 tablespoons per gallon, for 6 hours before planting, softens that coat and provides an immediate magnesium reserve for the first true leaves. Beans, squash, melons, okra, and morning glories respond dramatically. A University of Florida IFAS trial on okra showed germination rates of 91% on Epsom-soaked seed versus 67% on dry-planted seed from the same packet. That's a 2-4 point jump. Free. But here's the question that's been hanging over all of this. If Epsom salt is this useful, this cheap, and this old, why don't you see it on store shelves with the fertilizers? Why is it tucked away in the pharmacy section next to the foot soaks? I'll tell you why. Because there's no money in it. You can't patent magnesium sulfate. You can't brand it. You can't put a picture of a tomato on the box and charge $20 for 2 pounds of it. The garden chemical industry, by the most recent figures I could find from the National Gardening Survey, is a $52 billion a year business in the United States. $52 billion. Every dollar of that depends on you not knowing that a $4 carton from the drugstore does most of what's in those bottles, and does it better because it's a pure single compound with no fillers and no salt buildup. An entire industry is built on you not knowing this. Not one industry, the whole shelf. Which brings me to the one I promised at the beginning, the one I dug out of an agricultural bulletin so old the pages were brown at the edges. The technique that became my secret weapon, and the one I've never seen on any modern gardening channel, blog, or product label. This is the finale, and once you know it, you won't be able to look at your garden the same way again. There was a USDA Farmer's Bulletin published in 1936, number 1761, that described a practice common among truck farmers in southern New Jersey and eastern Maryland in the 1920s and 30s. They called it the salt drench. Not table salt, Epsom salt. What they did was take a 5-gallon bucket, dissolve 1 full cup of Epsom salt in warm water, then dilute the whole bucket, and pour 2 cups of that finished solution directly into the planting hole at the moment of transplanting, before they set the seedling in. Not after, before, while the hole was still open. The reason this works, and why it's been forgotten, is that the dissolved magnesium sulfate creates a small reservoir of plant-available magnesium directly under the root ball, exactly where the new feeder roots will be growing in the next 10 to 14 days. The seedling doesn't go through transplant shock. It doesn't yellow. It doesn't sit there sulking for 2 weeks the way most transplants do. It hits the ground running because the nutrient is already in position, dissolved, waiting. I tried this for the first time 3 springs ago with 12 tomato seedlings, 6 with the salt drench, 6 without, same variety, same bed, planted the same afternoon. The drenched 6 were producing ripe fruit 11 days earlier than the others. 11 days. On the same variety. In the same row. The truck farmers used it because they were paid by who got to market first. They didn't care about theory. They cared about beating the other farmer to the auction by a week. And it worked so well it became standard practice on those farms for decades, until synthetic transplant fertilizers came along in the 1950s and the bulletin got filed away and forgotten. You can do this exact thing this weekend. Any seedling going into the ground, vegetable, flower, or shrub. 1 cup of Epsom salt in 5 gallons of warm water. Stir until dissolved. Pour 2 cups into each planting hole before you set the plant. Settle the root ball into the wet hole. Backfill with dry soil. Water normally from there on. That's it. That's the trick that died with the men who used it. It was real, it was used, it was buried under marketing, and now you have it back. You just got back something that was quietly taken from you by every glossy bottle and every brightly colored bag you've walked past in the garden center for the last 50 years. You didn't need any of it. You needed what was already in your cabinet, and somebody made a fortune making sure you forgot. You're the kind of person who refuses to keep overpaying for what nature and $4 at the drugstore already does. That's not cheap, that's smart. That's the way your grandparents gardened, and it's the way the best gardens in this country were grown long before anyone tried to sell you a subscription to a plant food. Now, I asked you earlier to drop your zone or your state down in the comments. Do it now if you haven't. I want to know where these tricks are going to work, and which one you're going to try first this weekend. Tell me. Tomato, lawn, rose, or the salt drench. I read every comment, and I tailor the next videos based on what you tell me. If you want to keep recovering the knowledge the industry spent decades burying, the practical stuff your grandparents knew and the marketing people made you forget, stick around. There's a community of us here doing exactly that, and we're not buying what we don't need to buy anymore. Next time, I'm going to show you the 4-ingredient pantry mix from a 1,948 county extension pamphlet that drops Japanese beetles off your rose bushes in under a minute without a single chemical and costs about 60 cents to make a gallon. The active ingredient is something you used on your breakfast this morning. I'll see you there. Before you click away, though, I want to leave you with a few more things your grandfather knew that the garden industry would rather you never figured out. Because we covered 21 tricks. But the story behind why those tricks disappeared is almost more important than the tricks themselves, and I think you deserve to hear it. In 1954, a man named Howard Wilcox ran the Agricultural Extension Office in Lancaster County, Pennsylvania. He kept meticulous records, the kind of records nobody keeps anymore, handwritten in ledgers that are still sitting in a county archive if you know who to ask. Wilcox documented that the average home gardener in his county spent about $2.40 a year on soil amendments. By 1974, 20 years later, that same average gardener was spending just under $31. Adjusted for inflation, that's almost a tenfold increase in real spending, and the yields per square foot had actually gone down by about 11% according to his successor's notes. 10 times the money. Less food. That's not progress. That's marketing. The shift happened because of 3 specific things, and I want you to know them so you can spot the pattern the next time somebody tries to sell you the new miracle product. First, in 1958, the Federal Trade Commission relaxed labeling requirements for proprietary fertilizer blends, which meant companies could start putting trade names on bags without disclosing the cheap base ingredients. Second, in 1962, the major land-grant universities began accepting research funding from the agricultural chemical industry at a scale they never had before, and the extension pamphlets that used to recommend Epsom salt, wood ash, eggshells, and coffee grounds quietly stopped getting reprinted. Third, in 1971, the first television commercial for a name-brand consumer rose food aired during a Saturday afternoon gardening program, and within 5 years, sales of generic magnesium sulfate at hardware stores dropped by 62%. That's the story. That's how a $4 box of crystals that your grandmother used on her tomatoes, her roses, her lawn, her pepper plants, her hydrangeas, and her houseplants got buried under a wall of brightly colored bags, promising the same results for 20 times the price. Now there's something I want to address head-on, because I know somebody in the comments is going to say it. Some folks will tell you Epsom salt is overhyped, that modern soil testing shows most gardens don't need supplemental magnesium, and that you're better off sending a soil sample to your county extension and waiting 6 weeks for the results. And look, if you've got the patience for that, more power to you. But here's the thing the skeptics leave out. Magnesium deficiency in home garden soil is far more common than people admit, especially in the eastern half of the country where decades of acid rain leached magnesium out of the topsoil, and in any garden where you've been growing heavy feeders like tomatoes, peppers, and roses year after year without rotating. The yellowing between the veins on the older leaves, the blossom end rot that shows up even when you're watering consistently, the roses that bloom small and pale in the second flush, those are signs your grandmother could read in about 4 seconds, and the fix was always sitting in the cabinet next to the witch hazel and the rubbing alcohol. A heaping tablespoon dissolved in a gallon of warm water, poured around the drip line of a struggling tomato plant on a Tuesday evening in late June, and by Friday morning you'll see the new growth come in darker, glossier, and standing up instead of drooping. That's not a placebo, that's chemistry. The magnesium ion is the central atom in every chlorophyll molecule in every green leaf on your property. No magnesium, no chlorophyll. No chlorophyll, no photosynthesis. No photosynthesis, no tomatoes worth eating. It really is that simple. And it really has been that simple since your great-grandfather was working his first garden plot behind a coal company house in 1928. Don't let anyone talk you out of what works.